Hey guys, it's me, Mr. 250, and welcome back to Umineko. Quite a scary scene we had last time with the blood, and and Kumasawa was like, "Holy crap, there's blood," and we were like, "Yeah, whatever, we've seen worse." And now I guess we're eating breakfast, and it was dry and tasteless. Of course, this was right after something like that had happened. No one felt particularly hungry. Dang, I kicked my mic. Hold on. Alright, move that out of the way. However, we realized that not eating would weaken our bodies. It would also be rude to Kumasawa-san, who had made the breakfast. Kumasawa-san had taken the tasteful Western vegetables, ones that Goda-san had probably ordered to make the meals feel more elaborate, and cooked them in a Japanese style, making them turn an unpleasant color. As to what Goda-san had been planning to cook with those ingredients, right then, I couldn't even imagine it. If I did think about it, I would be reminded of the way Goda-san had died, and the inside of my mouth would be filled with a sour taste. For the time being, everyone pretended to eat, but no one was actually going to move their chopsticks. Then, everyone began thinking about the current situation. First off, Kurasoji-san, my dad, Kirie-san, Aunt Rosa, Goda-san, and Shannon-chan. 6 people whose cruelly mutilated corpses had been found in the Rose Garden storehouse. And despite that, without being able to use phones or radio, we still couldn't contact the police. So, until the typhoon passed, there was nothing we could do. Furthermore, Grandfather, who we had hoped might be able to show a little leadership in this kind of a situation, had disappeared some time ago. Goda-san hadn't made breakfast, so Grandfather's stomach must have been empty. And if he had just been taking a casual walk, we should have been able to hear him whining about how hungry he was about now. And despite that, he hadn't appeared. There was more than a small chance that he had become caught up in the earlier crime. Aunt Natsui and Aunt Eva had said that, on their return trip from going to see Kinzo, they had called out to him on every floor, looking for him, but were not able to find him. If you think about the timing of it all, it was probably best to think that he had been caught up in the crime. If the culprit had taken the trouble to move the corpses of Dad and the rest, who we figured had been killed in the dining hall, all the way to the storehouse, maybe they had already killed Grandfather, moved his corpse to some strange location, and we had simply not found it yet. No one actually said it, but this theory seemed extremely convincing. Hold on, I gotta fix the boxes again. The only problem is when I go and reset the text boxes, it always clears out the text. It's just kind of annoying, and I can't actually read it ever again. This sounds like a bad idea. Aunt Natsui followed the servants, Genji-san, Kumasawa-san, and Kanon-kun out of the parlor. All that was left was Aunt Eva, Hideyoshi Oji-san, Dr. Nanjo, and the 4 of his children for a total of 7 people. Oh yeah, everything will go great. Hideyoshi Oji-san tried to stir up this gloomy atmosphere, acting cheerfully. Well, at least it's working for Maria.
Oh, so ka. Maria-chan wa terebi miru ka? Ja, Oji-san to issho ni miyou na.
Maria was the only one who played along. Even though Maria had been told of her mother's death, she didn't show the slightest flicker in her emotions. Maybe it was because Maria was only 9 years old and was still too young. Everyone else's mood failed to improve, and they each sank absent-mindedly into their sofas.
Aniki, 聞いていいか? なんだい? さっき倉庫で兄貴はシャノンちゃんの指輪の話をしたよな。あれ、 送ったのは兄貴か。
George Aniki didn't answer, but he hung his head and closed both of his eyes. There could be no clearer response.
よせよバトラー、少しは察しろ。
He's a little dense sometimes.
悪いことを聞いたぜ。そうさ、僕だよ。彼女に昨べ求婚したんだ。その時指輪を渡した。明日になったらそれを好きな指にはめて返事としてくれって。気ざったらしいことを言ってね。
And that ring had been on the ring finger of Shannon Chan's left hand.
私さ、数年前からシャドウに相談を受けてたぜ。ジョージ兄さんのことでさ。
なんて言ってたのかな。
シャノンは嘘をつくのが下手だったからよ。ジョージ兄さんのことを言ってるのはすぐにバレバレでさ、自分は使用人の身分だけど親しくしてもいいのだろうかとか、男の人の好きそうなものは何かとか、どういう服を着たら喜ぶかとか、そんなことをいろいろとさ。なんつうのか、
それが婚約指輪を渡されて、そこでおしまいかよ。
価値観は人それぞれだけどよ、男から求婚されるってのはある意味人生の到達点なんだと思うんだよ。だからきっと昨夜のシャノンは心の底から、いや生まれてから今までの中で一番幸せだったと思うぜ。
George Aniki, without raising his head, sighed deeply. Or maybe tears had risen to his eyes.
シャノンは昨べゲストハウスの当番だったらしいんだ。でもシャノンは僕と一緒にゲストハウスに帰るのを恥ずかしがってお屋敷に行ってしまった。
シャノンの気持ちを察しろよ。婚約指輪をもらえばどんなに予告されてたって普通は舞い上がっちまって頭は真っ白になっちまうぜ。気恥ずかしくて仕方なかったんだろうよ。
それでシャノンは当番でないはずのお屋敷へ行き、そこで郷田さんの仕事を手伝い事件に巻き込まれてしまった。僕があの日あの場所で指輪なんか渡さなければさよは事件に巻き込まれなかったんだ。兄貴、それだけは違うぜ。断じて違う。だからそれ以上泣くんじゃねえ。
バトラー君、そっとしてあげなさい。
I feel like Battler probably is the least sensitive individual in this whole thing. Or at least the person who's worst at being sensitive, maybe with Eva being one of the few exceptions here. After Aunt Eva spoke to me, I stopped talking to him. Misplaced words of comfort might actually hurt him. Jessica sat down next to Aniki and put an arm around him. Maybe only Jessica, who had known about Aniki and Shannon's love since the beginning, and who had discussed that relationship with Shannon, could comfort Aniki now. I went over to Aunt Eva and sat down on the opposite sofa.
バトラー君は強いわね。もうだいぶしっかりしているように見えるわよ。
まあ ほら、愛の深さが傷の深さじゃないですか。俺は別にあんなクソ親父同志の方が知ったことじゃないし、キリエさんは気の毒ですが、まあ本当の親ってわけじゃないですしね。
あら、という割にはさっきすっごく大泣きしてたわよ。
まあ育ての親に対する恩はあのくらい泣けば OK かと思いまして。
そのあたりの切り替えの速さやドライなあたりは本当にルドルフ譲りね。すぐにケロリと平静を取り戻したわ。
そんなことはないっすよ。俺だってまだまだ心のショックから立ち直れちゃいません。ただ俺がみんなと違うのは、それによってどういう感情が生み出されるかってことだと思います。
Yeah, for most of everybody else that was there, it was somebody that was important to them, or at least somebody that meant a lot to them. While for Battler, he lost his dad, who he really didn't care for, and Kyrie, who he kind of felt bad about, but she didn't mean a lot to him. Whereas, you know, George lost both his dad. Wait, no, he didn't lose his dad, sorry. He lost Shannon, and Jessica lost her parents, right? Yeah. And, no, Jessica lost her dad. Sorry, I'm getting all confused here. The only person that hasn't really had a bad reaction in the slightest is Maria.
どういうこと？
I had been acting much calmer than George, Aniki, and Jessica had been. That wasn't because my sadness was any less intense, or because I had already sprung back to normal. It's just because my sadness was gradually replacing a different emotion.
悲しいっていうよりは腹立たしいって気持ちなんすよ。どこのドイツがこんなことをしやがっ
It's
た
the
のか。
homeless guy in the woods, I told you.
横っ面に一発お見舞いしてやらないことには腹の虫が収まらねえんです。
That was what I really wanted to do. It was like I couldn't allow myself to just sit here, overwhelmed with sadness and hugging my knees.
親父たちが殺されて以降、この島は台風に包まれたままです。つまりこれだけの上等を決めてくれやがった野郎は
Definitely seems likely.
島の中にいるってことです。
そういうことになるわね。今も暗い森のどこかに身を潜めているのかしら。
I felt like I had a very similar conversation with Kirie-san the night before. That's right. After the letter from the person who claimed to be Beatrice appeared at the dinner table last night, we had talked about whether or not a 19th person actually exists.
エヴァおばさん、この殺人、昨べのベアトリーチェの手紙と何か関連があるんでしょうかね。
ああ、例の？さあ。
Even if you didn't go immediately to Beatrice actually existing, that letter definitely seems to have something to do with what's going up, because both of those events seem very out there for being coincidences.
あの手紙はお父様が遺産問題に絡みたくて出した怪文書という見方で兄弟は一致したんだけれども、それと今朝の事件に関係があるかは今の段階では分かりかねるわね。
あの手紙、本当にベアトリーチェなんて魔女がマリアに渡したんすかね。
まさか。全部お父様の仕組んだ茶番でしょ。シャノンちゃんあたりに肖像画のドレスを着させてマリアちゃんを騙したんでしょ。お父様らしい手の込みすぎたいたずらだと思うけど。
I don't really know at this point. I feel like that would be too much nonsense for him.
昨べキリエさんとベアトリーチェは実在するんだろうかって話をしたんですけど、キリエさんも俺たち18人の中にベアトリーチェがいるだろうと言ってましたね。
そんなの当然じゃない。この島には私たちしかいないのよ。なら私たちの中の誰かがベアトリーチェを語ったに決まってるじゃない。
すか。
当然でしょ。 私たち以外の誰がここにいるっていうの？この島には私たちしかいない。18人しかいない。ならベアトリーチェを語るのも18人の中の誰かしかいないじゃない。
Curious Anna denied that there was a 19th person by turning over the chessboard. Even though Aunt Eva hadn't constructed an argument that complicated, her opinion was at least the same. Except that, if that were the case, our situation would start to look very ugly. At the time of Beatrice's letter, the matter could be easily settled since it hadn't seemed to be anything more than a prank. However, now the matter couldn't be settled by a simple denying the existence of a 19th person. In other words,
19人目がいないなら、親父たちを殺した犯人も18人の中にいるってことになっちまうじゃないですか。つまり、今この屋敷にいる誰かが殺したってことになる。
I'm blaming Goto-san. Aunt Eva smiled meaningfully. It looked like Auntie thought that this conclusion should have been obvious from the very beginning.
犯人は倉庫の中に6人の遺体を運び込んだわ。でもよく倉庫の中に運び
Yeah,
込
they
めたわね。
did, which definitely makes it feel like that they might have been a servant.
あ
or
のシ
one
ャ
of
ッ
the
ターは常
servants.
に閉められていて施錠されていたそうよ。
I mean, going by this logic, of course, you know, the witches don't exist.
つまり倉庫内に運び込むにはシャッターの施錠を開ける必要があった。わかる？
たまたまその日、シャッターが開けっぱなしになってた可能性は？
使用人たちは常に閉めていると言ってたわ。
Unless the servants are in on it, every single one of them, even the dead ones.
つまり鍵を使用人室から持ち出さなくては倉庫は絶対に開けられない。
鍵は使用人室の一つしかないんすかね。
源氏さんはそうだと言ってるわ。ということは犯人はそのたった一つの倉庫の鍵のありかを知っていて持ち出した。さっきカノン君が使用人室に鍵を戻すとこ
So
ろ
you
を見た。
think Cannon maybe knows where it is, since Cannon was the one that first stumbled upon it?
壁にびっしりと鍵
Ah,
が
I
かけられ
see.
とても素人にはどこに何がかけてあるのかわからなかった。犯人はその中から倉庫の鍵を見事選び出したの。しかも札も何もついていない鍵を手にしてバラ庭園裏にある倉庫の鍵だと理解した。ついでに言うと倉庫の場所すら理解していた。もっとはっきり断言するわ。犯人は使用人室の内部にも熟知している。
Her argument was extremely plain and clear. If the bodies had been found thrown somewhere in the bushes of the rose garden, there wouldn't have been much to go on. However, if there was only one key to the storehouse in the servant room, and it was stored with such a large group of keys, a novice would not be able to tell them apart. This meant that the culprit was someone who could normally enter the servant room and knew where the key was well. The family didn't normally go into the servant room, which meant that...
ってことは、使用人の誰かが犯人。
悪いけどそれ以上はおばさんも言えないわよ。
Skipped over this a little fast, sorry. I don't know, because see, that's an obvious interpretation from that. But at the same time, anybody here basically has higher rights than the servants, so they can just go in there at any time they want. It's not like they can't do it. So I don't think that necessarily makes the people of the house and you know, all the family members, I don't think that would necessarily rule them out in this situation. But it definitely makes it seem less
一つ
likely.
だけ教えられることがある
Apparently scrolling down when you're at the bottom advances the text. I didn't know that. But yeah. And then, of course, you know, the witches don't exist. Yeah. Whoa.
犯人たちは複数でそして十
Creepy
分
red
に
filter.
偽装していたと考えられる。
Red filters are creepy.
だってそうでしょ。食堂にいた兄さんたち4人を一度に襲って殺し合計6人分の遺体をようようと
And so so she's insinuating that the servants worked together to do this, possibly. It was impossible. It might not have been if a single person had enough time, but that would have taken ages. It was probably best to think that a significant number of people had been part of it. Not necessarily. I feel like if you had I think it would take some time, but if it's at a period of time where everybody's either asleep or, dead in this case, that's in the building, then they'd have a pretty significant amount of time to do this. Just saying. Even the ones that were killed? Little iffy, but possibly. We don't really have any evidence to that at all. We're just making a kind of barely thought guess, honestly. Like, this is based off of a single piece of possible evidence. I had been playing detective with Aunt Eva, trying to expose the person who had killed Dad and the rest before the police did. If only I could skillfully penetrate the culprit's identity. I wanted to stick proof that it was them in their face. I had been so sure that, just like in one of those detective movies, the culprit would then give up and surrender. However, the culprit would only surrender if there was no way for them to fight back. The culprits behind these cases on the island were far from helpless, and might even be able to massacre all of the remaining people on the island. And on top of that, this island was like a giant locked room, cut off from the outside world by the typhoon. So they had a full day, until tomorrow, to kill, scheme, and camouflage themselves. In short, it wasn't a safe atmosphere where we could get very far by playing detective. To the contrary, we were at a stage where we had to be scared stiff, since playing detective might displease the culprits, and cause them to repeat another mass murder.
あくまでも可能性の問題よ。でも私は使用人の人たちをまだ信用できないわね。それに私は使用人だけを疑ってるわけじゃないわ。さらに黒幕がいるかもしれないと思ってるわよ。
黒幕？おお。どうしてですか？
勘よ。使用人は書いて字のごとし。
Well, they serve.
誰かに使用されて手足となる存在よ。
I suppose, yeah.
殺されたのは後宮家の親族ばかり。
True. It is the Ushirimiya family conference.
ならその結果で利害が発生する人間が関わるのは当然。
This was also plain and clear. It all went straight to the discussion that had been taking place in the Ushirimiya family about how to distribute the inheritance when grandfather died. If this case followed the standard form of any classic mystery novel, it was definitely a crime by someone with ties to the Ushirimiya family, and who was entangled in the inheritance problem. Auntie had probably also read a few books in that genre. Aunt Eva's argument had a few one-sided conclusions to it, you think, and it was probably a shortcut that anyone could have reached. I think anyone would have doubted the servants, even if their logic was different. Especially the story about the key to the shutter. That was enough to make it easy to suspect that one of the servants was involved in the case.
だから、なぜか気に入らねえんすよね。
気に入らないって何の話？
あ、いえいえ、こっちの話っす。
spooky. I tried to trick her by joking, but I couldn't wipe out the sense of unease I felt inside of me. Because it was an easy-to-guess reach. A guess that anyone could reach. Is there a reason why there's all these dots in my text? And I just couldn't accept that. If I tried turning the chessboard over like I had learned from Kiryu-san, that was exactly why it was impossible for the servant to be a culprit. If the servants really had been the culprits, they wouldn't hide the bodies in a place that was tied to themselves. There were other places besides the Rose Garden storehouse, whose key they themselves controlled. Like, for example, a ditch somewhere in the forest. The police would probably immediately pursue whoever had been in control of the key. That would create a danger for exposure. If we were to assume that they were the culprits, they had no reason to carry the bodies into the storehouse. In fact, even Cannon, because Cannon, quote, found it. Let's just say they were trying to store them for the night until they get a better spot in the morning. Why would Cannon have come back and told us about it? It's almost like he's trying to set himself up for it. If you twist that around, why did they purposefully put them in the storehouse? No, that definitely didn't make sense. When the police come in and inspect the site, several things will probably become clear. No matter how deeply careful the culprits were in carrying out the murder, some kind of traces will definitely be found. So, in summary, they had everything to lose and nothing to gain. If you think about it this way, and look at the game from the culprit's side, it would seem pointless for them to let corpses be found. If the bodies were found, a report would be sent to the police. The remaining people would become even more cautious, and they could start looking for the culprit. Anyway, none of these things would make the culprit feel any more comfortable. Just like the words of the main character's mother in a novel I recently read called Higurashi no Nakukoro ni. A mystery story had 4 parts: introduction, development, turn, and conclusion. Eliminating the first part was essential for the perfect crime. Right now, no one knew where Grandfather was. We didn't know whether he had already become a victim or if he was one of the culprits. But this state of confusion had to be beneficial to the culprit. By showing us the bodies that obviously, and making us all realize that there is a murder case going on, the culprit had absolutely nothing to gain. Right, that was where we could turn the chessboard over. So the culprit's goal was to clearly show us the bodies. So, at the very least to the culprit, the appearance of the corpses there meant more than the deaths themselves. In other words, the culprit wanted to display this murder. Definitely seems right, especially with a very visible symbol like that. To who? To us. It was a message from them. The culprit was trying to shove something in our faces. I didn't know what that could be. At the current time, none of us could grasp anything from this vulgar mass murder except malice. Malice towards everyone, perhaps? That definitely seems correct. They definitely wanted the bodies to be seen. Yeah, I'm going to do another one, but we're going to take a quick break for restarting the software, so hold on, be right back.